So, I would like to start this discussion by leveling with everyone for a minute. I am preparing to talk about disability and accessibility. And for many of you in the audience, you are likely thinking to yourself, well, this conversation doesn't include me. But there is a saying that goes that we are all one accident and or one major medical event away from acquiring a disability. And also, the large-scale traumatic events that have happened within our society may exacerbate the disabling impact of mental health disorders. So when we are talking about disability, we are all in this together, more than you know. I would like to rewind for a second and introduce myself. My name is SeriaShia, and I am legally blind, and I have albinism. Now, I know it's likely that some of you out there in the audience may have immediately thought to yourself, I would have never guessed she is legally blind. Trust me, I am. And for some of you, you may have also thought, well, what does a person who's legally blind really look like? Me. Individuals with invisible disabilities are out there more than you know. Up to 34.3 million individuals have invisible disabilities, from autism to ADHD to learning disorders to chronic fatigue syndrome, arthritis, and diabetes. When my parents found out about my disability and genetic condition, they were wholly left alone to guide not one, but two children through the world with albinism and who were legally blind. Our culture and our culture's perception of individuals with disabilities and accessibility has led us to a world in which I believe that parents and caregivers, and eventually the individual who is differently able themselves, strive to make their disability invisible and or strive toward normal, rather than focusing on how their disability may change their experience, and in my case, help me literally see the world in a different way. As I indicated earlier, when it comes to being an individual who is differently abled, I am not alone. Per the CDC, 1 in 4 individuals will have a disability and or acquire a disability in their lifetime. Disability can impact an individual's access to educational and occupational spaces. When it comes to work, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics, only 19% of individuals with disabilities are gainfully employed. And when it comes to African Americans, their numbers are even lower at 15%, compared to 66% of individuals without disabilities. The difference in those numbers are staggering. But what if I was to tell you that when it comes to issues of access to educational and occupational spaces, that the issue does not lie with the individual with disabilities, but with our culture's perception of disability? So how do we, as a culture, get to a place in which disability truly means differently abled? So let's start with the definition of disability. The definition of disability wholly places individuals with disabilities in the category of not as good as, less than, and or abnormal. This is not only outlined in countless articles and journals on disability identity, this is also defined my life. As a young child, my father was in the military and we moved from place to place. During my K through 12 education, I would attend over a dozen schools. Every move was marked by that monumental Individualized Education Plan meeting, better known as an IEP. An IEP is a plan in which schools work with students to ensure that students with disabilities have accommodations to ensure that they have a fair and equal access to education. Some of my teachers were amazing, and they worked through accommodations to a place to which I felt that I did not have a disability at all. One such teacher was Mr. Plattis, my 9th and 10th grade art teacher. Mr. Plattis wholly believed that any student can be an artist. He believed it so much that I started to believe in myself. Any barrier that came between me and art, Mr. Plattis was there to creatively remove. I ended up placing in an international art competition. And then I moved to a place, an art teacher who shall not be named. This new art teacher believed that all of the accommodations that I was receiving from the school that I was in before was cheating. This teacher refused to provide me accommodations no matter how hard my mother and father fought. They were only able to ensure that this teacher was unable to fail me. My love of art withered and died. I tell you this story not to garner pity, but to emphasize the importance of centering the needs of individuals who are differently able to allow them to thrive. This is the concept behind radical accessibility. Radical accessibility, based on Mia Mingus's concept of liberatory accessibility, centers the voices of individuals who are differently able. In a radically accessible space, we can change from spaces that look like this to a culture and climate that centers the needs of everyone. Centering the voices and needs of individuals who may have the least access can open up our spaces to everyone, because when we consider the needs of individuals who are differently abled, we are, in a way, making places accessible to all. Now, some of you out there may be thinking to yourself, radical accessibility, yeah, that's great in theory, but that is going to be pretty difficult to do. And to that, I will say, you are absolutely right. But really, what things that are worth doing are actually easy? I am going to challenge you to think about the reward on the other side. With only 15 to 19% of individuals with disabilities gainfully employed, imagine all of the untapped potential our society is missing out on simply because we are not making all places and spaces accessible. Now, let me be clear. There is large-scale change that needs to happen to make our world radically accessible, because the needs of individuals who are differently abled cannot wait. But the exciting part about it all is that we are already on our way. Some large-scale traumatic events that have happened in our society over time have caused us to make some changes out of necessity that we may have previously thought to be radical. If we work to integrate these quote-unquote radical changes into our new normal, we can continue to move forward to make our spaces more accessible for all. I would like to offer you some ways, large and small, that we can keep integrating these radical new thoughts and ways of looking at our workplaces and keep moving forward. Let's start with video conferencing. I know. Many of us may be extremely tired of video conferencing, but for businesses who have been forced to log on, imagine the millions of individuals who have access to the workplace who did not have access before. If we work to maintain some of the courtesies of video conferencing, we can change the climate of our workplaces for the better. For those of us who may be tired of video conferencing, I will tell you personally, I love it. Being legally blind, I am unable to drive from one place to the next. Video conferencing allows me to be able to access places from the comfort of my office. And it can also help individuals who may be differently abled in regards to mobility to be able to access workplaces across the country from the comfort of their own home. Next, I would like to encourage you to say your name. The interesting and awesome part about video conferencing is your name is in the corner box of your screen. No matter how many meetings we have been in together, whether it's the first, second, or third meeting, we often try to replicate this courtesy by using name tags and name placards. But that courtesy does not work for everyone. Trust me, I would probably need to get my face about 2 inches away from your chest to see your name tag. Too often we assume that our faces are memorable, and we forget that not every individual has the ability to see our face. By saying your name, you can help individuals who may have visual impairments or may be blind or may or be differently able due to memory concerns to be able to focus on the conversation rather than focusing on trying to remember your name. One additional thing I'd like us to think about is to normalize the use of shared digital spaces. Doing this allows individuals to be able to access agendas and PowerPoints for meetings by using the accessibility of their own technology. Using technology can be burdensome, but in this way, it's another way for us to make our workplaces accessible for all. I am going to challenge us, however, as a society, to think even bigger. I challenge us to restructure with the least access in mind. By designing and thinking about individuals who may have the least access in the forefront, we could design spaces and access ways that allow everyone to be able to equally access workplaces and educational spaces across the country. My final challenge is for us to think about what is most important and necessary. In educational spaces, what that would look like is our teachers boiling down the number of assignments to those assignments that will help students to achieve the key performance indicators. And in organizations, what that would look like is to break job descriptions down to the key competencies needed to actually perform the job. An example of that is, as a director of equity, my job is district-wide, and it requires me to move from building to building across town. My job could have easily thrown in my job description, must have driver's license. But what is more important, how I get from one place to the next, or the knowledge and support I'm going to provide when I get there? Drilling down to what is most important and necessary has the potential of being able to open up our educational and occupational spaces to millions more individuals. I would like you to imagine a world in which accessibility concerns are a thing of the past. Imagine individuals being able to have access to all places and spaces. Imagine the untapped potential our society can benefit from. And now I'd like you to stop imagining and let's get to work. Thank you.